Building an army for Kings of War is easy, but to make sure you set off on the right path, I'm here to give you a step-by-step guide to building your first Kings of War army lists. I'm Andy from BlackJack Legacy, and this is Kings of War List Building 101. The first thing you need to ask yourself is, which faction are you going to play? Now, there are currently 29 different possible factions in the game, with a 30th one coming later this year, and all have many different reasons why they might suit your needs. Some factions have lots of low point costed options, which means you can swarm your opponent on the table with cheap expendable units to have to chew through, whereas some have more hard hitting units which may cost you more in points but will stick around a bit longer and really deal out the damage to your friend's army. Some factions may really pique your interest from the rich background stories that Mantic have created, and the free downloadable World of Panathor lore and background book might be exactly what gives you some of this inspiration. If, like many folks, you're inspired by just choosing some cool looking models to hobby with, then there's a whole range of options available, and you can check them out on Mantic's website, which I'll link to below in the description of this video. If, like me, it's a bit of a mix of all of the above, then Kings of War has it all. Because I'm going to be list building here as part of my BlackJack Legacy Kings of War Slow Grow Challenge, which is leading up to Mantic's own global campaign in September, I'm going to choose one of the main protagonists of the campaign and show you how to build a Night Stalker's army. Whatever you choose, just make sure it's something that inspires you to keep at it, and not because it's the latest thing or because you've heard it once won a tournament. Kings of War is a game that can grow to bigger points levels with lots of models, should you choose to go that way, and if you're not motivated from the start, you'll easily get distracted from completing your project. Okay, so now you've chosen your faction, you're going to want to decide on how big a game you're planning to play. Now, if you're just getting started, I'd recommend starting out at a lower points level, as this not only makes building and painting your army a more manageable task, but it also gets you playing faster and helps you learn the rules quicker. Mantic have helped us out here with a smaller game version of Kings of War called Ambush. This is perfect for smaller games up to 995 points and tweaks a few of the list building options to try and keep things a little more balanced at smaller points levels. You can of course go straight into the bigger points games with the full Kings of War rules, and the list building is equally as straightforward. For this example, I'm going to do a 995 points list for Ambush, as I want to start playing my army as quickly as possible. Don't forget the Mantic Companion list builder we'll be using here, along with the Kings of War rules, are all free on Mantic's website. So before we dive into building the list, you'll want to know what kind of units you can choose from, right? As this is a game where the footprint of the unit is important, you'll want to understand the differences. There are 12 main types of units which can vary in size, so let's go over them briefly. We have infantry, heavy infantry, large infantry, monstrous infantry, cavalry, large cavalry, chariots, swarms, war engines, heroes, monsters, and titans. Now remember that the footprint of your unit is the bit that's important. Well, this is where one of the joys of Kings of War comes in, because you're not adding or removing models during your game, you can do something called multi-basing. This is where your base is the overall correct size footprint for the unit, and then you glue your models to it in a mini diorama style, rather than just ranking them up on movement trays. It's one of the things that really sets Kings of War apart from other games in a hobby perspective, and really allows you to have some fun creating little stories with your individual units. The type of unit you choose and the number of models you have in that unit all affect the overall footprint size, and in the rules there's a handy table to keep you right. Each unit size will have different stats and point costs, so you may want to consider this when selecting your units for your list. So onto the list building. To start off, open up the Mantic Companion website. There's a link to it in the description of this video, and hover over the Kings of War tab. Come down to the Kings of War list builder and give it a click. On the right hand side, you'll see a green tab saying Create New List. Click on this, and now we need to select a few things. First up, let's give your army a name. This is just so you can remember it when you go back to it later. I'll call mine BlackJack's Night Stalkers. Next, we can choose our faction. Click on the arrow at the right and we'll get a drop down list of all the available factions. I'll be choosing Night Stalkers 2023, as this is the latest list with some updates. Next, we need to set the points limit. You can highlight this and type over it with the number that you need. I'll be choosing 995 points. An option you can do is to choose a faction to ally your army with. Some organised events and tournaments allow this, and others don't, so it's up to you. For home games, it's obviously optional, but for your first list, let's just keep it simple and choose none. Lastly, we're going to choose our game type. The options are normal, which is a full-scale Kings of War, or ambush for those lower points games that we talked about. Ambush uses the same game rules generally speaking, however limits some of the powerful list building options, so this means it'll help you not to select units that might unbalance your games. We're going to select ambush here. Click on the create new list and we're taken to the different options available to us for our chosen faction. As we're just getting started in Kings of War, let's begin with adding the content of an ambush starter set to our list. In the Night Stalkers starter set box, we get enough models to make a troop of Reapers and 2 regiments of Butchers. Hover over the plus icon next to Reapers and click on it. This will drop down and show you the stats and options for the Reapers. In the ambush box, you get 10 Reapers, which is enough to make a troop. So let's click on the plus icon next to troop. This adds that unit to your list and shows the stats and rules for that particular unit in a little more detail. Next, we're going to add the Butchers. So click the plus icon next to the Butchers, and again, it will drop down to show our options. Now in ambush, we can only take a regiment size unit of Butchers, which is 3 models. However, we get 6 models in the ambush set. These models can be built as either Butchers or as Ravagers. So to have some variety in our first lists, let's select a regiment of Butchers and then a regiment of Ravagers. Now in the top right hand corner, you can see that it's keeping a track of how many points we've spent so far, and also whether we are building a valid list. A valid list means that you aren't including any models or options that you haven't unlocked yet. When building an ambush army, you can include as many troops and regiments as your points will allow, and for every one of those units you have, you can unlock one of the following: a hero, a monster, a titan, a war engine, or an irregular unit. Now, irregular units are units that you can't have too many of in your list, as they'd be a little bit too powerful, and we know this as they're marked with an asterisk symbol like we can see here on the Phantoms. If you look at the bottom of your list, you can see some details about the units you've taken so far. This will tell you about how many hero and monster and titan slots you've unlocked, and also how many you've used, which is a quick way to double check. Now so far we've spent 390 points and we have 605 points remaining to spend. So where do we go from the ambush starter set? Well, you may want to bulk out your army quickly and opt for a Night Stalker army box, just to keep things simple as you first start out. In this box you get 20 Reapers, which you can also build as Tormentors. Now just to keep some variety in your army, as we've already got some Reapers, let's build them as a regiment of Tormentors, which is 20 models in size. This takes our total up to 600 points. Next up we get 20 Scarecrows, which you can also build as Doppelgangers. Now I quite like the Scarecrow models, so I'm going to add a regiment of 20 Scarecrows to take my list up to a total of 675 points. Now we're going to add the Banshee that comes in this set. The Banshee is a hero model which needs to be unlocked. However, as we already have plenty of troops and regiments in our list, this isn't a problem. This adds 145 points to our total, leaving us with 175 points left to spend. Let's add in the Mind Screech, which also comes in the army box. The Mind Screech is a monster which also needs to be unlocked, but again, we've plenty of troops and regiments which allow us to do so. You can see on the Mind Screech options that we have to make a choice of what type to take. We can take it as a singing aberration or as a planar apparition. Either option is a free choice, so choose the one that you think will work with how you want to play and click the checkbox beside it and then add the unit to your list. Now we have 25 points remaining, which isn't enough to add in the Butchers that also come in the army box. However, this gives you some options to tweak your lists for later games. To make use of those 25 points, we can add some upgrades to our army. If we go to the Banshee in the army list and click the edit symbol in the top left, this allows us to adjust the entry for that particular unit. If you look across at the right hand side, you'll see Magical Artifact. This allows us to add some nice upgrades to our units for a cost. Click on the down arrow at the right and this brings up a drop down list to show what's available and their points costs. There's a lot to choose from, and you can find out what they all do in the Kings of War rulebook or in the upgraded rules in the companion app. Below this, you'll also see that there is an option that the Banshee can take called Resonant Chorus. This explains what that effect does. However, in Ambush, you can't take unique spells or options. If you try and select this, the list will tell you that you have an invalid list and explain why. I'll let you look through the lists of options yourself and choose what you'd like to take, but for simplicity, I'm going to choose one 25-point magical artifact called the Boomstick. You can of course take lower points upgrades and spread them around your different units. With this, we now have a 995-point valid army list ready to take to the field. This whole army costs less than you'd expect, gives you a good mix of units and options, gives you some extra models to start your first tests of list building and tinkering with your options, and is also only 7 units, so not too overwhelming from a hobby perspective. I hope this gives you a brief glimpse into how to use the Mantic companion to build your first lists and show you just how simple it is to get started. So you have no excuses now. Get out and start your first army and get it ready for the global campaign this September.